Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again on my YouTube channel. This is Workshop Quick Takes. Today on Project XJ, we're going to use a spare vehicle that we've been working on to demonstrate how to do anything you want to an ignition lock. And I don't mean steal the car, I mean clean it, fix problems with the ignition key not beeping correctly, change the lock pattern, replace it outright with one that matches your factory key, whatever you want to do. It's all possible using some fairly simple parts. And as it happens, this is a 2001 XJ, so it uses a common ignition cylinder that was on many Chrysler vehicles from this era. And the basic principle of taking apart and rekeying a wafer lock is universally applicable to all kinds of locks in file cabinets, desks, cars, whatever.
Get a haircut, hippie!
Now, in order to get the ignition lock, you're going to have to remove the plastic clamshell that goes around here. We've already done that. And you may want to remove this plastic kick panel to do that as well. There's 3 Phillips screws underneath that are supposed to take that out. And then it just pops out with a clip in here and a clip over in here. So just pull it this way and out she comes. But the main thing you're looking for is to get these off, and if you have to adjust the steering wheel up and down to do it, that'll help as well. Once you've done that, you'll have this top piece and this bottom piece, and the screws that you removed will have dropped out the bottom. 1, 2, and 3. Now there's one additional problem when we do this, and that is in order to get the lock out, we have to be in the on position for quite a while. If you want to, you can put a screwdriver back in there and try and flip the ignition switch back off if you remember to turn it back on again before you reassemble. Or you can just disconnect your battery for the duration. These battery terminals have been replaced, but even so, you're nearly always looking at a 10mm bolt or nut that has to be loosened. Remember, when disconnecting the battery, always disconnect the negative because it is common with the chassis, and that way you know the vehicle is fully dead. Now that we've done that, let's talk about why. In order to remove this lock, we're going to have to push in this little lever here, but it will not go all the way in right now, and the reason is because the key is in the lock position, and you don't want to be able to have anyone just come along and remove the lock cylinder if they don't have the key. So we're going to put in a key, turn it to the on position, and now put a screwdriver up here, and pull that out. And part of the reason why it's having some trouble here is one of the things that we want to solve by replacing this lock cylinder. This key is not supposed to pull out when it's in the lock position, and it kind of catches, but yeah, it doesn't stay. If you wanted to, you could reach back in there and flip that switch a bit to get it back to the off position, but since we disconnected the battery, that's not necessary. The other thing that's going on back in there, which you can see in more detail if you ever take this thing apart, is this little button right here, when depressed, is what causes the key minder chime to go. So if you're not getting a key minder chime, it could be something broken back in there, but it might also be that that little button back in there is not working correctly anymore. The key is supposed to force that button out. That button then presses that brown lever, and that brown lever then activates the key minder chime via another switch farther back in the ignition assembly. We'll take this inside where we have better working conditions and see what it takes to continue. Here's the cylinder, and to get an idea of what we were dealing with out there, you need to take a look at the construction just real quick, because that's also how we know how to take it apart. When you walk up to the ignition of the vehicle, you are in this position. Now when you go turn the key to on, you're actually counting past 2 pins, one there and one there. So now you are in on start. So there's nothing spring returning you from start back to on. That's handled in the switch over in the other half of the ignition. But when you're in this position anywhere, you're not supposed to be able to pull this key out. It's supposed to be locked in there. Well, this one, it catches, but it comes out. When you come back to here, that's the normal position to be able to remove the key because you're in off. From here, if you pop again, you come back to accessory. So this allows you to run the accessories without having the engine on. Notice that there's not a second catch for the pin over there, and the reason is you have to defeat this catch in order to open up the lock. But once you turn it past there, that removes. And then that gives you a look into the barrel. We have that little catch thing back in there. What that means is that in order to reinstall this, you have to slide it past there. So it only goes in right in this range right there. And then turn it past the pins. One just dropped out. Now that's something you should also pay attention to, because each of these 2 pins in here is just free floating in there with a spring underneath it. And they may be gummed up when you happen to take yours apart. Maybe they don't fall out like that, but they certainly can. We can still see the action of our wafer locks. Each of these is cut at a different depth internally, so that when the key goes in, it has to push past all of them, and then the lock is free to open. The reason is, this bar moves in and out ever so slightly as the key is inserted or removed, And that bar, when it is out, locks in here. There's only one slot, so that is your off position. Otherwise, the bar cannot spring back out because it's blocked by the barrel, and the key spins freely in start run. Notice, however, that even with this one having recently been cleaned and oiled like we did, one of the wafers there is not popping out, and this one here a minute ago wasn't, and now it's kind of trying to. There are two things that contribute to that. One is the lock getting dirty with age, and the other is the springs getting weak. But what should happen is, when we pull out one of these, and again, keeping in mind, there's a spring in there that could come flying, and we don't want, and it just did. It's over there. On this wafer should be a number somewhere. And there it is. It's a 3. And the reason for that is, wafers in these kinds of locks are numbered typically 1 through 5, although in the case of this Chrysler lock here, it's only 1 through 4. So in order to actually reinsert one of these, first off, you need yourself a spring, and then you need your wafer 3. And you can see how much that's jammed in there, or at least it was a minute ago. That's part of the lock being old, worn, dirty, whatever. Okay, so what can we do with this knowledge? If we continue pulling these out, this one, then 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 this one, we would get an 8-digit number. And that number would correspond to the key bitting. So, okay, let's take a look at what some of our replacement options are. This here is the first one, and unfortunately I've already kind of destroyed the packaging here. But what that said was 703719C. The C is for coded. And note that it says Chrysler Ignition Coded. And if you don't want to mess with changing out wafers, you can just buy a pre-coded lock like this one. 5910234AB would have been the original Chrysler part number. It's already lubricated, you can see the grease there. Accessory, regular. And if we pop it open, we'll see exactly what we saw in the other lock. Only difference is, for whatever reason, these new ones have steel wafers instead of brass wafers. And I assume that's because the key is brass and they're preferring on the newer design to just let the key wear down instead of tearing the wafers down with it. Although if you get any moisture in here and those rust up, you're never getting them unstuck again. But that one slides out nice and easily because it's clean and greased. But it is 2. Okay, if you want to proceed with coding your own lock, that's going to be 703719. This is a blank kit, and since it is specifically for the Chrysler, it does not have wafer number 5 in it. It just has 1 through 4, matching the coding of the original. Silicone paste for the lock, our wafers, our springs, and our 2 pins with their springs. Great. Here's how we would do a matching recode of this lock to this lock. Now we already pulled this first wafer out and said, okay, that's a 3. So I come to my little wafers here. I see 3. So I need to make sure that the lock is oriented in the same position because it's going to be this very first one that's a 3. As I insert that, I'm going to want to put just a little bit of the grease on it. Spring first. Wafer. Okay, I have now coded position 1 in this ignition lock as a 3, same as what I found over there. Like I said, these get really sticky with age. That's a 3 again. So I pull out another 3. This time I come over here, I drop in the spring. Once again, I very lightly grease, and I code it in. And again, in case it's not obvious what I'm doing, that little overhang goes down on top of the spring. That's what the spring's pushing it back up on. So that lock is now coded 3-3. And I got to do this 6 more times. I'm not going to go through all the numbers that are on that one, but we'll go ahead and do this real quick and then we'll see if the key works. Alright, just to give you an idea how sensitive these locks are to the keying, here's the key from the new lock in our old one, and it looks like it's pulled all the wafers pretty much in, but they are nonetheless defeating the lock because I should be able to reinsert that now, and I can't. It almost wants to go, but it's kind of stuck. Whereas, if I put the correct key in the lock and then get it lined up, it goes in immediately. And the new one, we'll do the exact same thing because it's now been keyed correctly also. Won't go in. Just like that. Okay, have a couple more steps to finish this up. First of all, we need to get the pins in there. These do have different springs, stronger springs. You need to make sure you get the right ones in there. Once again, we do want grease. We do this exactly like we saw in the pre-assembled lock. Both of these pins are the same size, so that's not a big deal. Either one can go on either side. And we will then put a bit of lube down in here, right where this piece spins, and just a bit more up here where all this has to go. If all went well, we're now ready to permanently reassemble this. That should work like a brand new lock. Okay, we're back out at the vehicle. And once again, we have to get the lock back in here, which means, first off, we gotta put the key in. And we gotta come forward off of to the on position somewhere in here. And we should be able to press that in all the way. We can, which means it'll clip back into there. There we go. Now I just need to go into the hood, reconnect the battery again, and then we should be able to check the key minder chime and start and run the vehicle. I always like to tap test the terminal before just jamming it on to make sure I don't get a huge flying sparks. We're good. That should mean we now get a key minder. There it is. Really need to figure out what that squealing is on the pulley assembly, but job for a different day. Key works, we're good. So everyone, hopefully that gives you some ideas on what you can do in order to modify the locks on your XJ. Especially if you ever had a break-in and you've got a broken steering column and you're replacing a lock, you don't have to just take the one from the junkyard and hope that you can live with 2 keys or 3, which is what I found on this one when I got it. You can recode them, and note that the door locks and the hatch lock have their own little thing going on, but you can also take those out and juggle them around. You'll just have to remove a C-clip on the back of the lock that holds the little swing lever in place before you can disassemble the rest of it. A little bit different than how the ignition comes apart. That's really all there is to it. So, thanks for joining us again today, and we'll see you again next time, whenever that is. Has anyone seen my phone?